Turn back now to last night's primaries, and several Trump-backed candidates lost their races last night, potentially raising the question of just how valuable the former president's endorsement may be. For instance, Trump endorsed a replacement for Senator Mitt Romney's seat, but Republican voters in Utah picked a Trump skeptic instead. To be clear, Trump has never been particularly popular in Utah. In South Carolina, a nurse practitioner and Air National Guard officer defeated her Trump-backed challenger in the state's GOP's primary in the 3rd congressional district there. And in Colorado, the Trump-backed candidate running for the state's 5th district lost his race by 30 points last night. Joining us now to help us make sense of it, MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck. He was communications strategist and former aide to House Speakers Ryan and Boehner. So, Brendan, what do we make of this? Trump's blessing in a Republican primary is usually pretty golden. His candidates tend to win, but there were a trio of losses last night. Should we be reading into anything about this, about what his hold on the party is, or a lesson to be learned for November?
There may be some lessons to learn. Look, the president's or former president's endorsement is still very important, and members of Congress and candidates will bend over backwards to get it. But it alone is not sufficient for winning. If you have a bad candidate or you run a bad campaign, you can still lose. I mean, look what happened in Virginia with the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, Bob Good, who Donald Trump made it his mission to defeat, as did a lot of other people. They threw everything they had at him and barely got him by just a couple hundred votes. The dirty little secret is Donald Trump's record as it relates to winning primaries is he tends to just pick the person who they know is going to win, and it boosts his stats. I think what is actually most important or most notable here is that some of the people the people who lost last night were the more extreme candidates. And it may seem like there is sort of a limitless tolerance for Donald Trump's antics. There actually does seem to be an outer limit on what Republican voters will accept in a candidate, at least down ballot. The people who lost in South Carolina and Colorado in particular were very conservative on social issues. The person in Utah, of course, in Utah, you have a state that is probably abnormal in that it is not very Trumpy for a red state. But I think what we potentially can take away from this is the middle of the Republican Party still exists, and we can't ignore it. And they're not going to necessarily tolerate just the craziest, most far-right conservative that you can find. And that showed up last night.
Yeah, it certainly did. So, Brendan, let's turn to tomorrow night in Atlanta, the first debate of 2 scheduled between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Let's start with the president's side here. If you were his advisor, what would be some of the things you think he should press in terms of attack lines on Trump, but also defending his own record?
Well, I don't think the president should spend too much time defending his own record. I think it's a losing strategy to be playing defense the whole time. They need some top-line answers to some of the most pressing questions that people have, particularly about inflation. But I think for both of these candidates, it's keeping the other on their toes. If I'm Joe Biden, I'm trying to bait Donald Trump into talking about 2020, January 6th. Certainly talking about abortion and his record on the Supreme Court, things that we know are deeply unpopular, but also things that we know that Donald Trump doesn't have a very good answer for. If he goes into another defense of his explanation for how he won the election and how January 6th was no big deal, I think that is going to be shocking to a lot of people who don't tune into politics every day. And we have to remember, the debates like this, these big moments, are when people who aren't obsessed with politics all the time are finally tuning into these things. And if they see him still obsessed with 2020, I think that would be very good for the president.
So let's take the other side of this. How do you anticipate Trump responding to these attacks? Yes, his aides are saying, look, when he wants to be, he can be disciplined. He can be calm for 90 minutes tomorrow night. We'll see. But let's say he is pressed on abortion. He is pressed on January 6th. He is pressed on the results of the 2020 election. How do you anticipate him responding, and how bad could it be for him?
Yeah, I really do think he should try to be on his best behavior, and I mean maybe that's obvious, but there are a lot of people who will be watching this debate who don't like either of these men, and if he shows up like he does at a rally, I think it's going to turn off a lot of people. There is no shortage of things for Donald Trump to pivot to talk about Joe Biden's record that Joe Biden, frankly, doesn't have a very good answer for. Joe Biden still has not figured out a very good answer for inflation, and if he can talk about those things, and if he can talk about how the border is not secure, as much as the president or former President Trump tends to use really incendiary language. The idea that we should have border security is wildly popular. And if he can stick to things like that, where Joe Biden has had 4 years and no real good success there, I think he can keep keep President Biden on his toes as well. Generally, you typically tell somebody, like, talk to the issues that people are concerned about and tell them how they're going to fix it. I would say tell them about the issues that are concerned and tell them how the other guy is going to screw it up. I think talking about the other person is the best thing that they can be doing.
And a reminder that I will be live in Atlanta tomorrow and Friday for both Way Too Early and Morning Joe. MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck, thank you for being with us as always. And thank
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.